When someone dies by suicide, those left behind carry not only the weight of grief, but often the weight of silence, stigma, and shame. Suicide loss is a grief that many don't talk about, and that makes it one of the most isolating kinds of grief we can experience. My name's Linda Falasco, and I am a trauma and grief therapist. And in honor of Suicide Prevention Month, I want to hold space for those who have lost someone to suicide. This type of grief is often what we call disenfranchised grief, meaning society doesn't always acknowledge it, validate it, or offer support. But today, I want you to know your grief is real, your loss matters, and you're not alone. I truly understand this type of loss and this type of grief. I lost my brother Jeff to suicide 31 years ago, and my life has never been the same. I was already a social worker, and I was in school to get my master's degree to become a therapist, a licensed therapist, when I lost my brother. So I understand this disenfranchised grief and how different suicide loss is. So let's start with disenfranchised grief. Disenfranchised grief is a kind of grief that doesn't get recognized or supported the way it should be. It's when society doesn't really acknowledge your loss, or people don't know what to say to you, so you end up feeling silenced and isolated. And suicide loss is one of those types of grief. It's often surrounded by stigma, judgment, or even avoidance, which makes the pain even heavier to carry. And I'm going to talk about those things in a little detail right now. Suicide loss is a very complex loss. The sudden nature of the death leaves you often blindsided and in shock, which, yes, many other losses, people may feel in shock, but a lot of times with suicide loss, even if the person was struggling with their mental health, this still blindsides people because nobody really thinks that someone's going to take their life. It also is preventable. And that's just another layer of this grief. When we look at suicide as preventable, that gives people a lot of guilt, and they may start to blame either themselves or others. They feel guilty that they didn't see this. They feel guilty that they didn't do more. They may blame themselves for not knowing enough, not reaching out, not giving them a phone call. So with it being preventable, there's a lot of guilt and blame that are left with suicide loss survivors. The next one is the intentional nature of the death, meaning people look at it as a choice that somebody chose to end their life. And this often leads people to feel abandoned, rejected, and betrayed. But I want to read to you about this intentional thought. So this is a quote in Dr. Adina Warblowski, not sure I pronounced her name right, in her book, Suicide Why. It says, choice implies that a suicidal person can reasonably look at alternatives and select among them. If they could rationally choose, it would not be suicide. Suicide happens when no other choices can be seen. So that's a misconception that people have, that people make this decision. Most of the time, they want to end their pain. They're not wanting to end their life. They're trying to end their pain. And as I've read, she says that they're not able to rationally make a choice. That's another layer that people are dealing with. And I hope that you can hear that if you are going through this, about the intentional nature of this. Maybe that can shed some of this guilt that you might have. But then it may even turn to anger. Like, why would they do this? Why would they leave me behind this way? Leaving people to feel isolated, rejected, and abandoned by their loved one, but also by family and friends. When someone is going through this loss, people don't know what to say. People don't want to talk about it. I think people sometimes think it's going to be contagious. They feel judged. as you're walking through this. And that's really a hard thing as you're walking through it when you don't have your friends and family there. And I understand that. I lost a lot of people in my life at that time, meaning they just didn't show up. They didn't know what to say. They didn't want to say anything. So they ignored it and ignored me, leaving me to grieve alone. Or if I did run into them, to just ignore that it happened, ignore that I lost my brother, ignored that I am going through one of the most horrible things that I've ever went through in my life. Again, leaving me to feel rejected and alone. Avoidance, that's another thing. People will avoid you. They may see you in public and then turn away. That has happened to me. It happened to me many times. And again, leaving me to feel isolated and rejected alone. Another unique feature and what makes suicide loss very complex is the question, why? Suicide loss survivors are looking for an explanation, and they will go over this in their head, why, and more why, and more why. And this is something that I try to tell people that are supporting other that are going through this loss. You cannot give them the why. You can't give them the why. They have to come up with their own why, and their why is going to be unique. It's going to be different than other family members or friends who are also walking through this loss. You may come up with a why, and it may satisfy your soul for a little bit, and then it may come right back up again. That is normal with this abnormal type of grief. So that's important to understand. The questioning why. There are so many unique layers to this loss and this grief. I mean, I can continue to go on and on. That's just a little summary of what survivors go through. Suicide loss is often a taboo topic, meaning people don't want to talk about that. They don't want to look at that unless it's happened to them. So that adds shame and stigma. You hear suicide loss, it's usually shame and stigma are associated with it. And I can tell you, I've experienced it firsthand. And I experienced it right in the beginning, day one. And I know I've shared this story with others. So if you've heard my podcast, you probably heard the story, but I'm going to just say it really briefly for those who didn't, is that my introduction to stigma was when I was trying to arrange my brother's funeral, and I went to the local church where he had befriended a priest and asked if the priest told him about what happened to Jeffrey and asked would he be willing to do the funeral service. I was 25. I didn't really know what I was asking. And he was so kind and said, he would love to, and talked to me a little bit. He said, I'm not able to make that decision on my own. I have to ask the head priest of the church if it would be okay I to go and do this service. He goes only a few feet away from me, but it was like behind a curtain. It wasn't like the kind of Catholic churches you probably think of now. It was a small little church down in the Florida Keys. So it was literally a curtain, and goes behind me. I can hear him talking to the main priest, I guess, tells him, and loudly, this priest responds saying, is that boy who committed suicide in Big Pine Key? No, we don't do funerals for people who commit suicide. Welcome to stigma. Welcome to shame. That was my introduction. I'm sitting in a church, and that's what I heard. I felt alone, isolated, and ashamed. So that is something real that I know if you were going through this loss, that maybe you didn't feel it to that or have an experience like that to that degree, but I'm sure you've had other experiences where you may have felt that, and we shouldn't have to feel that. That's a misconception on their end. And what I have learned going through this loss is that people are ignorant, meaning they're not knowing. They don't know what to say, what to do. They don't know about suicide and the complexity that leads to it. So sometimes we might have to educate them. Sometimes we might need to let people know. But sometimes we don't have the energy for that, and it may not be our jobs. But I want you to know that this is one hard journey that you're going through, but you will get through it. You can get through it one step at a time, 1 minute at a time, maybe 1 hour at a time, but you can do it. I know that you may feel like you've been left behind and it's leaving you feel helpless. There is help out there. And I want to encourage you to reach out to support groups, a counselor, to others who get it, and lean into that. Lean into it. I know this is very chaotic because everything about this loss is chaotic. It literally has changed the world as you know it. It's very different now. You're probably not the same person. You can't be the same person that you were before. I'm not. I always say there's a before and an after, Linda. That Linda, she's long gone. She's totally changed. I can say that I did not know if the ground I was stepping on could hold me. That's how unsure I was about everything in the world. I didn't even know if the ground was safe. I didn't know if the people around me were safe. I didn't know what was going to happen next. Everything changed. It changed my belief system. Everything was shattered. Everything I thought I knew and believed in came into question. Wasn't sure. The family as I knew it, not the same. It never will be the same. Been impacted by a severe trauma. How could we ever be the same? And if the family system was already fractured in any way, that fracture can get bigger. If people don't come together, if they don't communicate, they don't talk, and they don't try to grieve together, it can get fractured and people could start to separate. So I would encourage, if you are going through this and you are family or, going in different directions and you don't understand each other and you are kind of not leaning into each other, but going against each other, please think about getting family counseling. It really can make a difference. So important that you learn how to grieve together. Don't let this loss tear you apart. I know that survivors often feel different from other grievers, feeling judged or silenced, and you don't belong in certain types of grief groups, but you do belong. You lost someone significant in your life. Many people describe their loss like they're hidden mourners, like they have to hide, even within their own families or communities. If that's so, find a support group that you can fit into. There are specific survivor or suicide support groups. Maybe reach out there. Don't stay silent. Don't be alone. I want to encourage you. Let's break the silence together. Let's start talking about loss. Suicide Prevention Month is just a month to remind us to bring light to hidden losses as well. Because part of suicide prevention is working with those who have lost loved ones to suicide, because we are at a higher risk. We're at a higher risk because we already lost a loved one. So it's so important that we bring light to this, that we start to talk about this, that you understand that your grief is important, that you're allowed to grieve your loved one fully without any shame. Speak their name, share their story. They lived a whole life. As hard as it is, try to focus on their life that they lived. Continue their legacy. Don't just focus on how they died. It doesn't have to erase the love, the memories, or even the impact that your loved one had because they died by suicide. I want to encourage you to continue to talk to others, to remember your loved one, to share those stories, like I said, and maybe even putting in the chat here a story about your loved one. Say their name. I understand, I'm here. I want to hold that for you, and I want to share these stories. If you're looking for other ways to get support, look in your local community for survivor groups. Maybe think about individual therapy. There are also online support groups on Facebook and other places online. Community vigils. I host a vigil every year on September 10th in honor of those that lost loved ones to suicide, so that we can remember together. Maybe contact other suicide awareness or prevention groups. We have quite a few in our area. Pennsylvania and Delaware County, we have the Emmy Carpenter for suicide awareness. We also have Hope for Hallie. We have our local task force. There are plenty of resources around. If you are unsure of some of these resources or you want help looking, send me a message, leave it in the comments. I will be glad to help you. There's also, I have a book for suicide loss survivors to help you in your journey going through this loss. I want you to continue these bonds with your loved one by remembering them, by speaking their name, and continuing their legacy. Healing does not mean forgetting. It means learning to carry the grief in a way that allows you to keep living. If you lost someone to suicide, your grief matters. You don't have to carry it alone. Speaking up breaks stigma. Saying their name breaks stigma. Loving and remembering your person is a powerful act of prevention and hope. I invite you to share your loved one's name in the comments below. And if you are in our local area of the Philadelphia area and you're around and want more information about our candlelight vigil on September 10th, let me know. I'll give you the information, or look and see if maybe your local grief support group or any other organization may be hosting a vigil. A lot of times they have it during the month of September. And be sure to reach out for support if you need it. Until next time, continuing mending piece by piece, one step at a time.